Okay, I want to talk a little bit about developments and patterns as, in Inventor. Um, we've been doing them in AutoCAD because it's really, well, it's easy to do. It's complicated, yes, and the steps you have to go through, but it's easy to draw them in AutoCAD because you're contemplating the 2D pattern. But to make an actual development pattern in AutoCAD, you have to take into account the thickness of the material and the bend radius of the material and the bend angle that you're going to be using. And you'll get into that a little bit later on in the semester, but what you would do is you would take your pattern as you've drawn it and you would add in that bend radius and the material thickness to come up with the pattern that you would use on a piece of metal. Okay, now we're not doing that in AutoCAD because it really complicates things. But in Inventor, Inventor is so much more accurate because you're dealing with things in 3D. It gets pretty complicated trying to deal with a simple development. Okay, and so here's one. It's exercise 9.47-1, and it's where'd you go? Okay, so it's a pyramid, and so I created it. I did a rectangle sketch on the top plane here, and to get it to come up to a point, I'll show you this because we are going to do a few of these exercises. Visibility. Okay, so in order to do that, I created a work plane, the height's up, and I put a point on that work plane, and then I did a loft of the rectangle to the point. And of course, you needed a path to follow sometimes, okay? And then I shelled the inside, removing the bottom. Okay, so that's how I made this. One example that I worked on is I went ahead and cut a groove in the middle of one of the faces all the way up to the top. Okay, so I cut a groove in it all the way up. And I'm going to show you some of the different ways that I've worked on these things. Okay, so those were just standard models. Here is the model. Okay, it's the same one I had before, my B version, but I brought it in, I went to environments and switched it over to a sheet metal part. Okay, and you would think that it would unfold, but it will not unfold. Inventor does not like Inventor doesn't like to make flat patterns from lofted objects. Okay, now it just doesn't like to do it. Okay, and so I can say go to flat pattern, and it doesn't unfold anything. Okay, we could I haven't tried this. It won't unfold it because there are no actual bends because this thing was created as a part and then converted over. Now, however, I've started another part here. Now I've got my rectangle, I've got a work plane, and I put a point on it. And if I try to do the lofted flange, and I'll go ahead and work through this. So you got two options here on lofted flange. You got a die form, which is something that would be pressed as a die, and then a break form or a press break where a flat piece would be folded up. That's what we would want to create if we're making a pattern. And so I'll pick my profile here, and it will not pick the point as a profile. Okay, so it just won't pick it because there's nothing there. So in this case, what I would have to do here is actually put a rectangle in. And I'm going to go ahead and let's see, can I do that? No, okay, so I'm going to go ahead and project the geometry of my base and do an offset. Yeah, and say I don't even like the ratio of that. I don't like that. So I'll go ahead and put in a small square and constrain it. I need my axes, and I'll go ahead and constrain. Constrain, come on. There we go. And I'm gonna make it like 1 millimeter. And now I'll try the lofted flange. And it will loft it with the press brake. Okay, and so now I have a sheet metal shape of what I want, and you can see how it's folded there. But if I try to do a rip, okay, so I got a rip for my seam. And now if I try to create a flat, let's see, A side flat pattern, and it did it. Amazing. Ah. Okay, but it's not true to size and shape because we can't get a point. We could make that rectangle so very, very small that it would appear to be right. And so in this case, it worked. Okay. In some of the examples that we're trying, these things just won't work for some reason. They will not unfold. I'll have another shape for you to look at and give you an example of that. But that was like a couple of different versions of how you can make these things. And if it's possible, better to go ahead and do it in the sheet metal environment as opposed to making a standard part and then converting it over to sheet metal. Now, some of these shapes are really weird where you've got truncations and leaning objects and things. So you'll have to, you're going to have to use additional work planes and work axes in order to draw your sketch and do your extrusions. Okay, but I'll have a video on another one that I'll show you shortly.